This is my daughter, and I would love to share some of her history that helps to explain some of her experiences, which is more than I've ever experienced in my lifetime. And I want to talk about sort of the cross between being a Native student, having disabilities, learning emotional or otherwise, and having English as a second language, and the experience that my daughter has experienced. We heard about Sibola, and we were already like really impassioned about it and wanting to be involved because my daughter is in this education system and not realizing that we would soon be encountering our own major issues in the classroom with similar hostility that's created in the environment, and with feeling stigmatized for even trying to speak up and advocate around that. One of the statements that the teacher made toward my daughter when he realized how little she understood and was frustrated by not being able to help her, that she didn't understand, that he turned it back on her saying, well, you need to learn how to advocate for yourself better. And as you can see, she advocates strongly for herself. But I don't know what the mix is as far as not understanding what it means to be respectful in the classroom, or not understanding what it's like to have that second language where you're constantly trying to interpret in your mind what's being said to you, and people not understanding like how long that delay is and the time that it takes for that. Or having to negotiate an environment even with classmates of her age where she's already getting a lot of the comments where at the end of second grade, she came home and said, Mama, I don't want to be Indian. So these are all like parts of the story that make it so challenging. That overlays like every situation of our children walking through the schools. I'm thankful though for everyone who's here, absolutely everyone, including the first speaker, because I think we all need to stay at the table to get through this together. And I worry that some folks take it as, well, if Native people are advocating for themselves, their families, their communities, that then other people are going to lose out, because my feeling is, no, we all win in this situation. We figure out how we all win, and we bring all our children along. I have some specific recommendations that I would like attended to. One of them is for the school system to take prevention approaches first, rather than letting our children fail or fall completely, so that there's no way of recovery, or that recovery is so much more challenging. To be able to take preventative steps. I heard there's pre-K that is a great preventative step, but we need prevention K through 12. And if my daughter had been able, she's in the process for getting more support services in regards to special education, and she's also been referred for gifted. But none of those things were in place, and so she was having to suffer this hostile environment, this inability to access the curriculum, and not having supports in place, even though she had an outside assessment by a neuropsychologist, certified neuropsychologist, that could have helped her to have more supports in place at the time to help her to navigate this in a more strong way. We've had to suffer the last 2 weeks with her pain while we waited and tried to move through this very complex system. And that's another piece, to reduce the complexity of that system in order to help our children faster. It's prevention before intervention. Speeding up the 504, speeding up the process for kids who come in with other needs as well and need that support immediately. And I think that cultural competency piece, others have commented before on it, that it's cultural humility. It's being able to deconstruct the systemic bias in the entire educational system that's needed. And so that's not a one-time training. That's a 10-year plan that does need to have dedicated funding put towards it, and it needs to have specific goals and outcomes that are going to come out of that and be measured every single year until the end of that 10 years to see if those are reached. And those teachers and faculty, the leadership that gets trained in that will get it repeatedly, multiple times over the year and multiple times over multiple years, increasing the skills and abilities that they have to navigate to make it a more anti-bias approach in our education systems to reduce the discrimination and racism that we find. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Strait. My name is Tricia Begay. I am originally from Arizona, Wood Rock, Chinle, Cottonwood, Salina, Kaibito. I identify myself as an Indigenous Native woman. I am a mother of 3 beautiful daughters. I am a single mother. I have 2 daughters who graduated from Cibola High School. One is here with me, Shania, and I have one who is currently at Cibola High School. I'm here today because as a parent, as a community member, and as a mother, I don't only just say that I'm a mother of my 3 daughters. I always address young children as my children. That's just how I was raised in my culture on the reservation. I was always identified as a child from my grandmother, from my aunties and my uncles, and people who I don't even know, but they are relatives of mine because of our unique clanship. And so when I meet an elder, regardless of their skin color, I address them as my grandmother or my grandfather, because that's me showing respect because of how I was raised. And I teach these values and these beliefs to my daughters. They know their clan, they know where they come from, they know their ethnic identity. My 2 daughters graduated from high school. As a single mother, raising your children and seeing your children finish high school is a great accomplishment. When your children suffer by hearing microaggressions, that word was referenced this evening, unintentional biases. We all have these unintentional biases. We all have biases, whether they're intentional or unintentional or raised within our culture. I was primarily raised among Native Americans, Navajo. It was rare for me to see a non-Native in my community until I left the reservation. I've learned to live, in a sense, in 2 worlds. I've learned to acculturate in 2 worlds, always having my beliefs first and foremost, having respect for my elders, having and showing respect for the children, and being a concerned mother, not only for my 3 children, but for all the children. My daughters had experienced an experience which they felt very hurt. They were hurt because of 2 teachers expressing a statement, and they felt hurt because of those statements that were said to them that addressed being Native American. As a mother, my first response was, I'm going to get a hold of the school. I did respond by email to my daughter's school counselor, to the principal. I copied the Indian Ed program director. I was alert. I was just communicating with everybody. Because for me, my children are very important. And if they hurt emotionally, psychologically, as a parent, and as all parents here, we are all here together because we are concerned about not only our children, but the rest of the students that attend APS. And we want our children to feel safe and comforted, and to know that as a community that we are doing something to correct the actions that have been taking place. Well, my daughters were able to, I was able to take care of the situation was rectified at that time. I'm grateful that my daughters, one of them had an awesome school counselor, and not all the teachers at Cibola are bad apples. Most of them are very good, and most of them are there and want to teach, and they're there for your students, for our children. And as parents, we just have to be there expressing our concerns, in which I do, whether it's good or not. And so I know that my daughter, my current daughter, who is at Cibola, has an awesome school counselor. And if there is a concern regarding her education, then I go definitely I follow my protocol. Definitely research the area of where she's going to school, who her teachers are, but I also reach out to my community. My parents, I'm grateful that they are with us. They give me guidance. I reach out to my community resources, the school, the medical, any medicine men that are out there, our elders, we reach out to them for wisdom and for teaching. And as an indigenous woman, I always am proud to say that I am a person who I can turn to as far as my resources. I rely on my community, and being an urban Native American woman who is a mother, a grandmother, an auntie, a student too. One day I won't finish school, I know that. I'm in school too. But I am a person who is also accountable as a mother, as a parent, to my family and to myself. And I think as far as the cultural competency training, I did make suggestions in reference to addressing, and I think a wonderful doctor, she's my mentor, she mentioned holistic cultural competency. Cultural competency is very broad. It covers so many different areas. We can have the skill, the knowledge, the literacy, but it's reaching back to what about ourselves? How do we check ourselves as far as our own biases, as far as our own microaggressions? How do we address that? And so through that could be through a process of critical self-reflection in cultural competency. And so, we all have to be accountable. And that's just how I was raised. And I know that in our Navajo philosophy, we go by addressing, we talk about our philosophy where we make plans, we think about things, and we put things into action, and we do it, and we reflect back on it. And so a lot of our teachings will go back to how we were raised by our grandparents, by our parents, and by our ancestors. And so I think what could happen is that some of this holistic teaching can be incorporated or integrated into a cultural competency training to also include the knowledge, the skills, and training, and how to work not only with the indigenous population, but we're a very unique, diverse state here. And it's not only, I think about my children, but I also think about the other individuals who are non-native and who are indigenous, who are unique, who are minorities as well, who also need that voice and advocacy at all APS schools. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for giving us an opportunity to listen to each other and to speak to each other. My name is Rosemary Blanchard, and I'm a retired grandmother at this point, but that's just one place along a fairly long path. And when I first came to the Southwest, I came to the Navajo Nation, accompanying my then husband, and needed work, and got literally drafted into the Navajo Division of Education, as it was called then. Now it is the Division of Diné Education, because I had a legal background and was a good technical writer where it came to legislation and things like that. And I received graciously from the people who hired me and who then worked with me the most extraordinary education. One of the things that I was assigned to do in the 6 years that I worked for the then Navajo Division of Education was to be the technical writer on the first Navajo Education Code that was adopted by the Navajo Nation Council in 1984. Obviously, it couldn't be my code. I'm Irish American and I was born in Connecticut. But we one summer went all through the Navajo Nation and we held 26 field hearings listening to the people. And with me always, since I am not fluent in Navajo, even now after several attempts at Diné 101, were my translators. And every time we met with the people, we wrote things a little differently because of what they said. We were told, this will never go through the council, it'll get tabled, nothing will ever happen. Those 26 opportunities that Diné people were given all over the Navajo Nation to speak their truth resulted in that first education code being unanimously adopted by the Navajo Nation. It has very little credit to me. All I did was put it in enough legalese that if you have to defend it in the court of another culture, the words will make sense to the judge. That was my part. The heart and the guts of that whole code came from the Navajo people. That is something I would love to see be more generally experienced by the people who live in the Navajo, in the Southwest, in New Mexico, in Albuquerque. I'm now, in my retirement, I am the chair of a human rights education community that exists within the National Council for the Social Studies. We established it so that it would be clear that in order to give civic preparation to any students in this country, regardless of their race and their ethnicity, or their gender orientation, they needed to be grounded in the fundamental human rights that give dignity to every person born on Mother Earth. And that's now an educational policy of the National Council for the Social Studies. I brought a copy of that position statement with me. A couple of years later, the special interest community on Indian education within the National Council for the Social Studies also moved forward a position statement that NCSS has adopted on respectful education regarding, let me see, what was the full title they gave it? Responsibility, social studies education that respects and affirms Indigenous peoples and nations. And that's now also an official position statement of the National Council for the Social Studies. What that means is any school or district that is not grounding its education in human rights and respect for Indigenous peoples is doing a lousy job, is not meeting recognized national standards for appropriate social studies that are recognized for everybody in this country. So this is an opportunity. When Nelson Mandela introduced the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions in South Africa, people want to jump to the reconciliation part, but he knew better. Truth was going to be the first thing that was going to be needed. I think APS really needs some truth and reconciliation and building from the ground up a culture of respect for every person. a human rights friendly culture. I even brought a little resource. Amnesty International has developed a handbook for developing a human rights friendly school that people are following all over the world. It's no substitute for the cultural sensitivity, for the indigenous education that has been promoted by people speaking here. But it's another resource. How do we create a culture in school that you would just know you don't do things like saying things like that to a student? On the way here, I drove past Volcano Vista High School. Remember a little while ago what happened at Volcano Vista High School? The Snapchatting of the KKK hoods? You would think to hear people talking about that and this, that they happened on different planets. They are part of the same phenomenon, folks. Different manifestations of not truly being grounded in respect for the human dignity of every person. So I had to get an education when in my 30s I was employed by the Navajo Nation. They had to educate me so I could be of any use to them at all. And I would suggest that it isn't just our students that need to be educated. We all need to be educated so we can be of some use to each other in building a humane and decent school system within a humane and decent community. It would be nice if it was within a humane and decent country, but I'm not waiting for that. We start here now.